Welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. Well, as much as it drives Fuzzybutts all over this place, absolutely crazy when they hear me say it. I am the host of this show, your big dog, Luke Robinson, back again with you this week. And look over there to my right, who's back with us that left us last week with Doug Pham. I guess she checked out of the science. It's Ginger Morgan. She's our co-host, our co-producer, and she's also the executive director of the Puppy Up Foundation. Ginger, how are you this week?
I am doing well. I'm pretty busy here in Memphis. I'm packing up because I'm moving to Middle Tennessee, and I'm surrounded by boxes, therefore the blurred background.
Yes, I'm also traveling too and stuff. So my apologies to our audience if this episode clips a little bit. My apologies. I will have better Wi-Fi and connectivity by next week. So yes, you and I are both in flux though, but it's good to see you. Glad to have you back again. And Ginger, our guest today is fascinating. It's almost like a circle come round because we understand geo tracking and dogs all right back from the West Coast. We had a sponsor on the West Coast. It was called Tag, and they had some type of geo positioning. It didn't really work. I don't really think it worked at all on the West Coast, and whatever. They're a great company and good people for the most part. But the technology was sound. The science was sound, and I've always been looking for a better solution and most importantly, to help us with lost dogs, our lost fuzzy butts, not just dogs, also cats too, our fuzzy butts out there. And so I'm excited to have as our guest today, Andrew Bleiman. He's the Executive Vice President of North American Operations of Tractive. Andrew, welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, we'd like to start the show with a little bit of levity and fuzzy butts, since we are called Fuzzybutts and Friends. So I know you're busy, you're building, you're scaling a business you got to be crazy busy, but do you have any fuzzy butts of your own?
I do. I am a lifelong animal nerd. I've had many throughout my life. And at the moment, we have a 1.5-year-old mini Bernedoodle named Bowser. And she is a very energetic pup, very happy critter. We also have a 17-year-old cat named Hunky. And he's a total sweetheart, a little less energetic now in his older age. And 2 guinea pigs, Toast and Fondue.
Toast and
I love those names.
Yeah, I said,
Yeah,
go ahead, please.
Oh, I said I'll share that with my young daughter, who named them. So thank you. Yeah.
I love it. I apologize for the delay. I think it's on my end, but Ginger, I think he's one of our first guests that actually have fussy butts of a different sort, of a different kind. We usually get the cat variety, the dog variety, but we have the guinea pigs and Toast and Fondue. I love.
Yeah, I think this is they are our first guinea pigs.
I think so.
Well, that's a point of pride for me.
So let me ask you a question, Andrew. So a mini Bernie Doodle, that would be a Labradoodle plus a Bernese Mountain Dog and miniature size. Am I accurate on that?
Almost. No Labrador. So it's just a Bernese Mountain Dog mixed with a poodle. And I think it's second generation. So they mix a Bernedoodle with a Bernedoodle. But long story short, she's 20 pounds, which is very small for anything combined with a Bernese Mountain Dog. But she has, that very kind of sweet, loving Bernese personality and colorings. So we're lucky to have her.
I bet she's adorable.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much you know about my background, but I've backpacked 4,250 miles for the 3 dogs I've lost to cancer, and I've met so many Bernese Mountain Dog pet parents out there because one of the big problems for them is histiocytic sarcoma, and it's a big problem. And so burners are just lovely. I love the eye coloring because it's almost like camouflage, so you don't see them when you think they're sleeping, but they're actually watching. But Bernese Mountain Dogs are such a great breed. They're part guardian. I think they're part guardian, but they're great with families and kids and everything. So I'm a big Berner fan.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Again, I apologize for the delay. I guess that's the reason for the delay in the response, but it's on my end. I'm sure. Let's start off with well, first of all, give us your origin story, Andrew. How did you end up? Clearly you're a dog guy. You love dogs, and so how
Yeah.
did you end up with Tractive? How did those two roads intersect?
Yeah. Well, it was somewhat circuitous. As I mentioned before, I've been passionate about pets, passionate about zoology, since I was quite young. Professionally, after college, I worked in marketing and then got involved in launching consumer technology startups, typically as the head of marketing. Um, a few years back, well, more than a few, so about 11 years ago, I went to work for Vulcan. So Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen had a company called Vulcan, and it managed all things Paul Allen. So his commercial technology projects, Seattle Seahawks, Trailblazers, his real estate portfolio, but also his philanthropic efforts. And a lot of that was focused on wildlife conservation, which is, again, a real passion point for me. So I had the good fortune of being kind of the right place at the right time to get involved with shepherding a lot of his impact programs. So some elephant work in Africa, some work with marine mammal research and rehabilitation. We built the first marine wildlife hospital here in the Pacific Northwest, just south of Seattle. And after that, I went to work for Furbo, so a dog camera company, camera that helps you keep tabs on your pet, pop treats out to it remotely, but also some interesting computer vision components and bioacoustics built in there. And the world of pet technology is really not that big. They're kind of a handful of companies that have really scaled and really resonated with the market. And so, we often get to know one another in this, segment of the pet industry. And I got familiar with Tractive. I thought they had a great product solving a real problem. Again, we would trade tips from time to time. And eventually, they were looking to launch in the United States. They had been very focused on Europe for the first 7-8 years since they were founded. Very deliberately focused on Europe. And I helped them get started over here. And that was about 3.5 years ago.
That's an amazing pedigree. Paul Allen used to be the second co-founder of Microsoft and a tech nerd himself as well. And so Vulcan, yeah, that's their holding company. And yeah, they've done such wonderful things. And it is interesting, though, Andrew, the intersection of high tech and pet lifestyle, pet businesses, based businesses. And I think it's important. I'm glad that our paths connected at this point because veterinary medicine companies that are trying to commercialize disruptive technologies or innovative diagnostics or therapeutics, they're having a hard time of scaling. And some of them have been venture backed. We just lost a big one. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, PetDX, but they were venture backed and they just could not. They're a great science company doing cutting edge genomics and sequencing, but they just couldn't figure out how to scale. They couldn't figure out the adoption curve. And as you know, working in the tech business, is that trying to understand the adoption curve with pet parents, it's perilous. It can be perilous.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are quite a few, sort of notable names of companies with real funding behind them that did not make it. But then there are countless others where, sort of very talented entrepreneurs, talented engineers, innovators had a great idea. and struggled to find product market fit or build something that was sort of commercially viable. And so again, that is something that impressed me about Tractive. Before I went to work for them, they really had built a successful business, but more importantly, a really passionate customer base that relied on their devices for peace of mind and recovering their pets when they go missing.
Well, tell us about Tractive, where they're from, I guess as I think of all veterinary medicine, all veterinary businesses, all businesses as in terms of what problem are you trying to solve? So tell us a little bit about Tractive and tell us what big problem you're trying to solve in the marketplace.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back in time a little bit. We had a few co-founders. Our current CEO is one of them, Michael Hernos, and he grew up in Austria, but he was a very talented software engineer, and he came to work for Microsoft and helped build the Microsoft Surface, and then worked at Amazon as the technical program manager for Kindle Fire. So he was very instrumental in building the first Kindle Fire. Ultimately, he wanted to move back to Austria and just saw a real need in the pet space around pet tracking, right? And so the kernel of the idea was consumers need a way to find their pet in real time themselves if that pet goes missing, right? And there are solutions out there, and they all kind of serve to help keep your pet safe in aggregate. But existing solutions were microchips, which are important and invaluable. If someone else finds your pet and takes them to a shelter or takes them to a vet, it's a great way to get notified and get your pet matched back to the owner. But a lot of people don't know then and now that you can't search for a pet that's microchipped by yourself, right? On your own, right? And so you need that pet to be taken somewhere where they have special tools, a tool called a wand, to activate that chip and pull the data, right? Again, our founders were very familiar with GPS technology and thought there was an opportunity to build something based on cellular connectivity. So utilizing SIM cards, just like a cellular phone, to let you bring up your pet's location on an app, down to the foot and down to the second in terms of current location. And then, walk, run, or drive to go retrieve them yourself.
It's interesting. I mentioned right before we started the show is that my first walk was from Austin to Boston and no GPS. I don't really think I got a crappy GPS phone. It didn't work. This is in 2006, 2008 when I started walk one, I think, Ginger. But walk two was the West Coast walk from Canada to Mexico. And our sponsor was a company called TAG, T-A-G-G. I'm not sure you're familiar with that. It was before your time. But it was a catastrophic failure of a technology, but it was probably just too early for its time because it didn't have the real-time aspect. And so Ginger and I, well, we promoted it amongst our all of our followers and friends and everything, and so many of them bought them. And so but the problem is that somehow the signal has to go up to the satellite, and there's a tremendous delay. And as you said it's real-time tracking where you got to know if you lose your dog, you got to know precisely where they're at precisely that moment so you can go pick them up immediately. And so has Tractive sort of taken the lessons learned from some of the nascent earlier technologies and you built upon that? Or is it completely different in terms of its platform and how it works?
Yeah, there are a few players in this space, and there have been other players over time, right? And there is a fair amount of overlap in the technology that I think ultimately emerged as sort of standardized to make this work properly, right? Cellular connectivity is key, right? You know, and these devices have relatively low data requirements, right? And so it doesn't need a super strong signal. It's not like streaming, you know, Netflix with a weak cell phone signal. We can get away with you know, a weak signal. I think a real differentiator for Tractive, and part of what has made us so successful, is that we work with, you know, over 500 different cellular networks across the world, right? And in the U.S. specifically, we work with Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, U.S. Cellular, and others, right? And most other, at least domestic, GPS pet tracking solutions just work with one. Most work just with AT&T.
Wow.
So as a consequence, it's, you know, limiting right out of the gate, right, in terms of availability. And to be clear, you know, with Tractive, you don't have to pick one of those. The device is just going to automatically steer a connection to whichever one is strongest in a given area. So that's been very helpful.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, that seems silly that they would only partner with one carrier, because I think the real risk for pet parents is when they travel out of town, out of state, sometimes out of country, and you would want to have the relationships with cell phone carriers and the infrastructure all around the country and potentially the world, so that that tracker, I'm assuming it's, we haven't talked about the specifics, I'm assuming it's a collar-based tracker. You would want to make sure that it has constant connectivity, or at least it has cell phone connectivity at some point within frequent intervals. So yeah, it's amazing that other companies wouldn't think that that would be necessary.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is the result of our kind of European roots. So, you know, building a device like this in Austria, which is not a particularly large country, you know, by default, you need to be thinking about other markets. And in Europe in particular, it's very typical to, you know, holiday in a different country, or road trip to a different country, which may be, you know, just an hour away, or 5 countries maybe just an hour away, depending on which direction you pick. And you need the device to work, right, in those other locations, right? And so from day one, with Tractive, they had that top of mind, right? Now in the US, because it is such a large geography and such a large market, it may not be as apparent kind of out of the gate, you know, how important that interoperability is with different telcos and in different countries is down the road. But again, you know, when you're born in Austria, you need to be thinking internationally, or at least pan-Europe, which, you know, served us very well for our US launch as well.
So you're like the Spotify of pet trackers. I love Spotify, and the fact that it's not American, I think I love it even better. So, let me ask you a question. So, what is how does the tell us about the device? How do you, if I'm a pet parent and I'm thinking, my God, the last thing I want is to lose my kid, my fur kid. Just got a new fur kid. So walk us through where they can acquire Tractive, and more importantly, how does it fit on there, and how it potentially works? I guess treat me like I'm a pet parent that doesn't know anything about it, and because I would imagine you have to make it simple, right? I mean, the user interface has got to be extremely efficient, effective, and simple for pet parents, right?
Yeah. So, you know, there's a lot I can share here, and I'll share some, and let me know what else you'd like to know. But the short version is, you know, we sell dedicated pet GPS and health monitoring trackers, right? So we have devices for dogs and devices for cats, and they both do GPS tracking and health monitoring. The device itself is pretty small, kind of the size of maybe a thick thumb. And it attaches to any collar. So it is not integrated with a specific collar. It doesn't require a certain collar. It can attach to any collar and more or less any harness. So it's intended to be flexible in that regard. In the US, we sell exclusively online. currently. So you can get us on our website, you can get us on Amazon, you can get us on Chewy, you get us on Walmart.com. Once you receive the device, you need to activate the cellular connection via subscription, right? So a lot of people wonder, why does it require a subscription? The device itself is just under $50. The subscription ranges from about $80 to $110 a year, depending on what you choose. And the subscription is really what's critical when it comes to the data connectivity, right? So just like your phone, there's a cost associated with that connection and being able to send and receive data. So there's a cost to us, and there's that cost to the customer. So you activate the device with a subscription, and we have monthly plans, 1-year plans, 2-year plans, 5-year plans. And our average customer sticks with us for 4.5 years, which is a point we're very proud of. And then once the device is activated and it's charged and it's on your pet's collar, we're going to monitor a host of things, right? So of course, we're going to monitor your pet's location. And that's kind of the core driver for most pet owners for purchase, right? That's why they get the device initially. Maybe they got a new dog and they're not sure about, how likely that pet is to run or not, or maybe their pet dug under a fence or roams an unfenced property, or maybe they're visiting a vacation spot and just want a little reassurance. But it's that peace of mind that if your pet does go missing, you'll be able to retrieve it.
Well,
there are a host of additional features. Yeah, go ahead.
Please go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, so it's kind of extending out from that, real-time pet tracking value proposition. We have virtual fences, so you can set basically a zone. Let's say for a lot of people, that's around their home, and get alerted if your pet leaves that area. To be clear, it's not a containment device. It's not an invisible fence. There is no shock. There is no feedback to your pet, but you are alerted if your pet leaves that area, right? You also can set no-go zones, so areas to get alerted if your pet ventures into that area. Perhaps that's an intersection. Maybe it's a neighbor who prefers your cat not be in the yard, and you want to sort of keep tabs on that, no pun intended. You can also share, the location with friends, family, whoever you choose to kind of add for access to the device. And then beyond that, we have a host of wellness features, which, I'm happy to share a little more about as well.
So that was going to be.
I'm interested. I'm definitely interested in the health features. And also, I have a question about the subscription. So let's say I get 2 devices, then I get 1 subscription or 2 subscriptions?
2 subscripps. So just like a phone, right? We can't use a single SIM card for 2 different phones. I mean, I guess you could swap it back and forth, but yeah, each one needs to be connected independently, right? Now, if you got a second device as a backup or something, that wouldn't require 2 subscriptions, but you couldn't use them both at once.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly before I interrupted you, that was where I was going to, is that I'm very fascinated with your health monitoring aspects of it. And are you partnering with any veterinarians and or like VCA I mean, you're going to be tracking a lot of data, and I'm a data guy, and that's valuable data. And I want to make sure the data you're acquiring benefits pet parents together. So talk to us about your health monitoring aspects.
Yeah. So I should be clear, we are a health monitoring solution, but we are not a medical diagnostic device, right? Nor do we intend to be at this point. But here's what we do. We monitor your pet's activity, right? And we monitor your pet's sleep, including sleep interruption. Sleep interruption is often a proxy for pain or discomfort in pets and an early sign. Often our devices can identify sort of concerning trends in your pet's sleep or activity before the pet owner can themselves, right? And we make sense of that and alert the customer or the owner in one of two ways. So one way is we can look at your pet's baseline of activity and sleep and let you know when we see it strain, away from that, right? Either acutely or gradually. The other way we can do it is we have over 1 million active subscribers currently, and many other pet owners, over our 10 plus years since founding. And we can tell you not just what's typical for your pet, but what's typical for 10,000 other beagles between the ages of 5 and 6 who are male and neutered, right? And so those are the drivers of what we call predictive health alerts, right? So if we see that your pet is falling outside of the bell curve of normalcy of their cohort of pets of the same, breed, sex, age, etc., that may be cause for concern. We may have some suggestions on things to look out for, given the time of year, given the age of the pet, given the breed. But really what we're trying to tell you is we see something in the data here, and you might want to pay a little extra attention. Maybe you want to consider a vet visit. That's really your call, right? We also have some new APIs to make that same data available to veterinarians, right, through their PIM software. So if you walk in to your veterinarian, I think back to when I was a new parent 12 years ago, and we had a sleep monitoring camera for our kid, and we'd go to our pediatrician and we'd show them, our daughter, our baby, infant daughter's sleep, and say, hey, should we be concerned about this? And the pediatrician would say, I have no idea, right? Like, this is, I don't know what that data means, right? These days, pediatricians often strongly encourage parents to use these tools and can increasingly make sense of the data because it's in context, right? And so that's what we do with our data. So we make that same sort of bell curve of normalcy for, the breed, the sex, the age, etc., available to the veterinarian, right? Again, we're not going to tell them what is wrong. We'll just say, hey, this is kind of way off the mark from typical. And it's just one more piece of information for the veterinarian to assess the situation.
Yeah, if you're doing predictive modeling, you must be using AI. But that, to me, that's the value of data, is the predictive aspects of it. And I think of one use case that's I've always had Great Pyrenees, and they're not truly the barrel-chested dogs that get bloat like German Shepherds, but it is a potential. And one of the symptoms of bloat is restlessness. And they'll go out and they can't settle down, and your technology would totally track that and say they're not sleeping at all, they're restless, and they're active, and there may be a problem. So I see the power and potential of your technology. But what sort of AI tools in terms of predictive modeling are you using now? Or can you just—
Well, we've been working on this before, since before we referred to it as AI, right? But what I can speak to is, our devices have a variety of sensors and an accelerometer in the device itself. And oftentimes, we have hypotheses about what we can try to measure. But what's more interesting is looking at the data and seeing what it tells us, right? And so, for example, with our next gen devices, we anticipate being able to identify separation anxiety, or at least signs that suggest that that is a possibility, which again is top of mind for a lot of people with new pets or new jobs, etc.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm a little bit distracted. I'm talking about sleep patterns and stuff like that. I have a geriatric dog that's in the last stretch of his life, and he is so restless, and I can't get him to settle down. God bless him. And so he would be an outlier, substantially out of the outlier. That's why I'm checking on him. We've been traveling, and he's drinking water, and he might be whining. I'm not sure if you can pick it up in the background there. My apologies to the audience if you can, but that's Indiana. And anyway, he's drinking water and he's fussy. So I believe in the potential and the power of data and data sharing. So I love the fact that you're acquiring a bunch of data and you're looking at the potential of how you can use it to benefit pet parents.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are likely down the road synergies with, nutrition, right? Certainly with, veterinary health, perhaps with insurance, right? You name it. That said, what we're most interested in now is what can we tell from the data now about your pet, right? And leveraging that mountain of data we have about very similar pets, to provide, accurate information, right? So a little goes a long way, I think, in terms of the innovation in the space, and we take it incrementally. And again, we let the data drive a lot of this innovation on our side versus kind of determining, upfront what we want to look for and then trying to prove that we can find it, right? And we've been surprised in the past. So
Does
So on the health part of this, is that in real time? Like, let's say I'm traveling and I just wanted to check to see if maybe my dog is sleeping better or worse than when I'm there, and he's not sleeping with me, he's sleeping by himself or with my niece's husband.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it does update real time.
Okay.
And it does update daily, right? Because that's a kind of a good data point to build up cumulatively, right? It does require a baseline of a couple weeks of data before we start inferring anything from it, right? Quite reasonably. But yes, you can check and see, was your pet actually getting the sleep you expected, or did your pet get the walks that you anticipated
Yeah.
your, walker or sitter was going to provide?
Andrew,
That's interesting. That's very interesting. I didn't even think about that you could track whether or not your dog was getting the exercise you thought that it should be getting, or
It's a great
more.
double check. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, to dovetail that point, Andrew, does Tractive plan on publishing some of this data, because there's a paucity of data in veterinary medicine and the animal world, and so say for example is that if you just acquired a mini Bernie doodle, and that you just got that, and you're just wondering, I wonder how many steps or how active this breed is. You guys have a website, you have a link, and you have the scientific data that says the average mini Bernie, I have to look it up, mini Bernie doodle. It's the first time I've ever heard of that breed. Is active an hour and a half out of a day, 2.5 hours a day. I mean, for a new pet parent I don't know about you, but I didn't get my first dog until I was older, and Malcolm, and I was always worried about bloat. And I was scared all the time. I didn't know if I was doing things right. I was sure I was screwing things up. But I would have loved to have had that place that says, well, the typical Great Pyrenees gets, it walks this much every day, gets this amount of exercise based on these temperature settings and these conditions, because all that data is so important, because obviously if it's a colder client, they're going to be more active. If it's a hotter client, they're not. I would have loved to have had that data. So are you guys going to publish that data and make it available to pet parents?
Well, we already make some of it available in kind of more aggregated ways to the pet parent, right? So for example, we've had a feature out for a while around leaderboards, right? And you can compare that to other pets in your area. You can also compare it to pets of the same breed, right? So kind of see where you stand. And you also can build your own network of people to compare to, pets to compare to. Now, people have to opt into that, but we do have a lot of sort of communities of, breed-specific communities that create their own communities around that. I'd love to see us provide more ways for the user to slice and dice it in the future. Now, that is the data we're working with for the predictive health alerts, right? But we don't have it all available to kind of peruse, explore, beyond that. down the road, I mean, I will say that we've had many researchers in the past use our devices for their own studies. So Tractive shows up in a fair number of scientific research around pet activity and some around pet sleep. But all of that said, we come from the consumer tech world, right? And we move very fast in comparison to the academic world, to the pet health world, right? And so I think these things are converging, and I think it's going to be really impactful when we get there. But at the moment, we're mostly focused on what can we do now? What can we do now? What can we do in the next 3 months to provide a better experience, a healthier pet for our customers, for our existing customers? And I'll also add, one of the great advantages, sorry, one last quick thought. One of the great advantages of having a connected device like Tractive is that we are constantly rolling out software updates, firmware updates, and adding new features and enhancing existing features and extending battery life and improving connectivity. And so in a world where we are, as a business, very motivated to stick with a customer for the lifetime of their pet, we're strongly aligned with the customer's interest in, the device getting better and having a better and better experience. So.
Yeah, you couldn't have said that more saliently and accurately, is that companies have a choice, especially in the veterinary market, the pet product market, is scaling versus science, scale versus science. Science is slow. You have to do clinical trials. You have to invest all these things and then publish. But as you're speaking to, the marketplace adapts at a much faster rate. And PetDX, using them as a very important model, they were a solid science company. And it hurt me and Ginger and all of our veterinary oncologist friends that it failed because there was Silicon Valley money in that company. And it sends a negative signal, a negative feedback loop that don't invest in the science, scale versus science. So I think what you said is perfect, is there's got to be an equilibrium at some point. But when you're first to the marketplace, or you're just out in the marketplace, scaling supersedes science, it seems like, as it should.
Yeah, yes, I agree. And I should be crystal clear here. Scientists are my heroes, right? So I have the utmost respect. In another life, that would have been a road I went down. So the utmost respect there. But it's a different time scale, and it's kind of different outcomes, in those time scales you may be working towards, right? And so I think it is not a bad thing that these two sides are kind of evolving in parallel, right? And again, where we see them overlap and where we can, find real signals in our data that validate the work that their research, their hypotheses, the existing science, right? That's where we'll connect the dots, right?
Yeah.
And then on the scale side, I'd frame it just a little differently, or at least I think of it slightly differently. I think that is product market fit, right? Like there's a host of wonderful innovations that can be brought to market. The question is, what do pet owners want now, right? Like what's important to them, what matters to them now. And I joke sometimes that some of these big animal health companies who are doing amazing work are like sequoias, and we're like squirrels, right? We're like running around, right? Both are important, but it's just a different frame of mind in terms of how fast we move.
Yeah, I don't think anyone. We have a lot of.
I was just.
Go ahead, Ginger. Sorry.
Go ahead, Luke, and then I'll ask my question.
We have a lot of veterinary oncologists, veterinarians that watch the show, so I don't think they'll ever think that I'm dissing science, because I'm a data guy, I'm a science guy. But I like how you were saying there's interesting convergence between the two, and that perhaps there's an emerging model that can accelerate both of them at the same time. So please don't misunderstand. My audience won't think that you're dissing science because they know I wouldn't. I love science nerds. They're, like you said, they're my heroes. But there is the immediacy of the market, though, like what you were talking about. So go ahead, Ginger, because after Ginger finishes, what I want to talk about next is how big is the problem? When you talk about the immediacy of the market, right? I want to know what you guys think about how big this is a problem of losing your fuzzy butt, your companion, your mate. But Ginger, go ahead. You wanted to say something, please.
Yeah, so Tractive obviously tracks where they are, but it's also tracking their activity. So let's say I put one on my dog, Kelly, who is pretty active and she's kind of squirrely. She's, the whole squirrel thing. And then I have an activity tracker. Can I compare the two to see whether or not I'm getting more mileage than Kelly or Kelly's getting more mileage than me? And then for me personally, do I really want to know that? Am I going to compete with my dog on steps per day?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We actually just launched a partnership with Strava. So, the human sort of fitness tracking app, which is, a very large scale company. I think the biggest in its category by a lot. So, for running, hiking, but all kinds of athletic activity. It was surprisingly popular with our consumers kind of out of the gate. So there are quite a few people who do like to compare, or at least share, I think, that type of activity together, and then capture it together and then share it, perhaps with others or their community. That said, right, like Fitbit is going to monitor human activity levels in a different way than a pet activity tracker is going to measure it.
Right.
What's important is that there's kind of some standardization and normalcy within the pool of people being tracked, so you at least can understand what's in and out of baseline. And to your oncologist friends, right? This is why I point out that we are not a medical diagnostic device, right? We're a long way from being able to say, hey, cancer could be the problem. But we are already at the point where we can tell you something's up and there could be a problem and maybe you should talk to your vet, right? And in a case like cancer and a lot of, chronic conditions, it's helpful to know kind of at the earliest point, what might be going on.
Yeah.
I think that's important because, as a pet parent, sometimes you don't notice slight changes in your dog's behavior, or you're saying, oh, they're just getting old, or, oh, maybe she is sleeping too much, or, maybe not enough. Because sometimes I used to do a lot of pet sitting, and sometimes I would point out something to somebody about their dog, like, oh, your dog's lost weight, and they hadn't noticed. Or, something seems to be off and they hadn't noticed because they see the dog every day.
Yep.
And so if it was a gradual thing, that it's not something you notice instantly.
Yeah, and that's also why it's so helpful to have this massive data set of well over a million pets where, we can say, okay, maybe this is an incremental change seemingly to the owner, but we can tell you compared to, thousands of other pets exactly like your pet, at least in terms of, these other criteria, something's off, right?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, we know that obesity is a risk factor in so many diseases, and it's also a comorbidity as well. And cancer, and Indiana, the one that's making some noise back behind me, is he has peripheral neuropathy. And Ginger, you're talking about not noticing your kid gaining pounds, that I think Indiana put on 30 pounds and you never notice. So when there is a reduction in mobility and activity, man, that can cause some serious problems. So it's very important data. So let's talk about what I was referring to a second ago, where I tend to think of the marketplace as what problem are you working on and how big is it for pet parents? So the thing I worry about the most, not only when I'm traveling, is I guess most people, when they're active and they're very active with their fuzzy butts, they're always worried about their kids getting out, getting loose. And I just recently had my own personal experience about rescuing a stray dog in San Antonio. And man, let me tell you what a nightmare that was. There was no support services, and everyone just said you're all on your own. And it was not microchipped, and I got no data, and I was all on my own. So, Andrew, talk to us about how big of a problem it is for lost pets, lost fuzzy butts out there.
Yeah. So, most US animal welfare organizations, have a stat out there that approximately 10 million dogs and cats go missing every year. That's a very large number, right? Now, as a pet owner, you probably know best, how likely it is that your pet may or may not be, more of a flight risk. Whether it's a new pet, whether it's a new environment, whether it's, a change in your routine at home, when a pet goes missing, whether it's for 20 minutes or 2 hours or 2 weeks, even if they're recovered, that's usually a period of anxiety that you would never want to go through again, right? Yeah, so I think I was just sharing that, losing your pet for a short period of time or a longer period of time, even if they make it home happy and healthy, is a tremendously taxing experience, right? It's traumatic for you. It may be traumatic for the pet. And that's often the impetus for Tractive or other solutions, right? And so, in contrast to that, a device that's $50 and $100 a year, which is, less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks once a month, depending on what you're getting, is a pretty reasonable trade-off for, whether it's actually, going to be used regularly to retrieve your missing pet, or it's peace of mind that if it happens, you're going to be able to find your pet quickly. And I'll share just with our Bernedoodle, she never ran away. And then we moved homes. They had a dog at their house. They had a great fence, but our dog was smaller. And at some point, she learned to dig. And there was an awful lot of fence. And so for 4 weeks, she would find her way out once every couple of days. She didn't go far, but we wouldn't have known where she went otherwise, right? It's been absolutely invaluable in that regard, while I, spent days resecuring the fence so this can't happen again.
Well, 10 million, 10 million dogs and cats, that's a big, big number, and it's not just relocation or traveling. Ginger can speak about this. I can too a bit. I have a foster rescue, a 3-legged dog that was traumatized, and he goes absolutely nuts when fireworks go on. And Ginger used to run shelters and humane societies, and I didn't know that there were that many dogs that they, as soon as the fireworks show starts, they escape, they run away. It's a big problem.
Yeah. Well, perhaps not surprisingly, we see a surge in new customers in the lead up to the 4th of July and after the 4th of July. So you're absolutely right.
But I was just going to say, it's time for everybody to go to, where did you say that you could purchase them? I remember Walmart.
Tractive.com, or you can search for Tractive on Amazon or Chewy.
Yeah, Ginger, that's a great point. We should put this out right before July 4th, because they need to have Tractive before July 4th. Because right. Get it after, you can't find your fuzzy butt. So yeah, it's amazing how traumatic dogs can get during fireworks, and I didn't know that they would do whatever they could to escape from the noise and run away. But Ginger knows a lot about that from the shelter world, though. Ginger, don't you? I mean, escape dogs.
Oh yeah, you get a lot more dogs coming in after a holiday where there's been a lot of noise, like the fireworks, 4th of July, New Year's Eve, things like that. The dogs, typically shelters, humane societies will put out something, in social media, newsletters, or whatever, that says, keep your dog secure, keep it inside. And, I just remember one time somebody said, well, I took my dog to the fireworks display and it got scared and ran off. And I just wanted to say, duh, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, another very typical use for Tractive is on a large unfenced property. So, I sometimes say, we're as useful for a suburban homeowner as a vineyard owner in Sonoma as a farmer in Alabama. And we have an awful lot of farmers in Alabama who are customers, right? And those pets are free to roam, and that's part of their lifestyle. And that's fine until they don't come home, right? And these can be
right.
very expansive properties. It's not as simple as knocking on your neighbor's door, hanging up some signs. Thunderstorms can be a driver for that. But also just getting stuck in shrubs or on fencing or on wire with their collar or otherwise. So we're very popular in a lot of rural areas across the U.S.
Yeah, down.
That's good to know, because it always bothers me when there's no fencing for the dog. And the dog has a great life without the fence, right? As long as there are no roads. I mean, they can roam wherever. But like I was saying, I was moving to Middle Tennessee, and somebody was talking to me the other day that they had like 50 something acres. And so they had like a smaller portion fenced off for the dog, and then they have like all these security systems so the dog can't get out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, 50 acres, and how are you going to find a dog on 50 acres in the middle of nowheresville?
Exactly.
Well, that's why I love you could geofence, because down south is you actually have, if your fuzzy butt gets loose, let's say it's a Pyrenees, because they do love to roam, and your Pyrenees gets on a farmer's land. Some of those farmers shoot to kill. They don't know your dog. They have no idea that the Pyrenees are gentle and protective. They just see a strange dog that have breached their perimeter, and they would shoot to kill. So I would want that geofence and to know whenever they've left the property. But I know it's difficult for people in rural America to actually fence, but the fact that you have a geofence with Tractive technology is wonderful. All right, well, it's been a great conversation so far. I think we try to cap it around 1 hour. I think we're doing pretty good. Andrew, is there anything that I've missed, or Ginger? Well, Ginger's missed a lot. We know that. But is there anything that I've missed that you want to talk about?
No, I think it's been a wonderful conversation. I guess I'll just call out that, we're the most popular pet GPS and health tracker worldwide by a lot. 1 million plus active subscribers is a lot of data. It's a lot of peace of mind. It is challenging to have a connected device that works, in rural America, in the woods, in the house, etc. And not me, this isn't my work, but a testament, I think, to our connectivity engineers to get this right. Would encourage people, if they're looking for additional peace of mind, or know this is a pattern on their pet, to check out Tractive.
I love how you said this, is that you're committed to getting this right. And look, I love the people at Tag, and they were very wonderful for sponsoring us. But the problem was that lag time in the data, there's a 30-second, 30-minute, 2-hour, 2-day gap between where your fuzzy butt is located and now. Well, it's not useful data. So the important.
And a lot of that had to do, I'm sorry, a lot of that had to do with the cell service,
right,
where you were walking. So I'm glad to know that you guys are really, it doesn't take much of a signal to be able to track your dog.
Yeah. And, I'll be clear, if you're somewhere where there is absolutely no cell service, Tractive is not a great solution right now.
Right.
You will get notified when your pet comes back into cell service. But, if you're in the middle of the Grand Tetons, Tractive is probably not your best bet. I'd encourage you to have a leash if you can. Yeah. But for the vast majority of the United States and Canada, Tractive is a great solution in that regard.
Yeah, I walked the length of the West Coast and most of the East Coast, and there's a difference between AT&T and Verizon and service on both coasts. Say, by the way, I'm a tech nerd, and I always like to ask interesting questions. Have you guys considered partnering with Starlink? Because Starlink
Ah,
is trying to focus on the rural customers, and it seems like that would be an important market of yours.
yeah, so cell to satellite, I think is a real opportunity for this space in the future. Starlink and others are making some pretty exciting progress on being able to, provide cellular connectivity direct from a satellite, so not dependent on a cellular tower, potentially all over the world. And that could be really game changing for, I think, a lot of industries, and that's what they're betting on. Pet tracking included. I'll say it's still early days to kind of put that to work in the way it would have to work for pet GPS tracking. But I'd anticipate a future where that's definitely part of the mix.
That's exciting. Well, you guys are taking technology and making the most of it and making sure you get it right for pet parents. And because what we try to do here at Fuzzy Butts and Friends is represent pet parents all around the country and the world and make sure they're getting what they want in terms of usefulness, utility, and just making sure it takes care of their Fuzzy Butts. So, Andrew, it's a great company. Tractive, it's an exciting technology. Maybe I don't know how expensive it is, but maybe I actually I think I want to subscribe. Can you send Ginger the information how I can subscribe? My three-legged Pyrenees, he's three-legged, so I'm not sure how active, but that would be so cool to track like three-legged dog. How much more activity does he have?
Yeah,
I would love to subscribe to Tractive. If you could send Ginger the information, I would love to sign up for it.
I absolutely will. I've long had a theory that three-legged dogs may be a little jollier than four-legged dogs just because, there's so much bouncing in their
Yeah, there is, yes.
movement. Yeah, great to hear. And of course, we'll pass along the information and anyone can go to tractive.com as well and learn more.
That was the last thing I was going to ask. Is there any final words you want to have to pet parents out there? And more importantly, how can people find you on social media and on the internet?
Yep. Well, we're Tractive everywhere. So Tractive on Facebook, Tractive on Instagram and TikTok, Tractive on LinkedIn, and then tractive.com. That's tractive.com, or Amazon, Chewy, or Walmart.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Hold on for a second. We typically take a moment out of our episodes to have a cancer tip of the week from the Puppy Up Foundation. Ginger, do you have anything for us this week, or you've been just slacking off?
Well, I really like to slack off, but since we were talking about activity and you mentioned obesity earlier, I had a different one, but I'm going to talk about that. So a lot of times obesity not only lends itself to a lot of mobility issues and like arthritis and things like that, but it can also lead to cancer. So keep your dog slim, trim, get a tractive device so you can track your dogs, but also track their activity and their health. Like Andrew said, it's not going to tell you, oh, your dog may have cancer, but if there's something different in patterns, it can alert you to that, and then you can take your dog to the vet. But make sure you keep your dog slim and trim this summer. Get out, walk with your dogs. If it's not too hot, if it's warm, do it in the evening or in the early mornings when the sidewalk or the street's not hot.
I was going to say, unless you're in San Antonio, Texas, where it's a giant mud pit trapped in a heat dome where it's 115, 118 every day, it seems like. So you got to be very careful when you're active with your fuzzy butt early morning, like Ginger said, or late in the evening. It was San Antonio, it was 108 degrees with the heat index at 11 p.m. the other night. I don't think that's good for some fuzzy butts. So it's tough, but you have to be responsible. Yes, what a great episode, Ginger. Thank you for the cancer tip. Obesity is a comorbidity, and it's also a risk factor for so many problems and so many diseases. So long as you're not stuck in San Antonio, Texas, get out with your fuzzy butt and get a lot of activity and exercise, and then track it with Tractive, and then hopefully you'll be able to compare that to other Fuzzy Butts of your kind, and you can learn things. And then more importantly, it will enrich your relationship with your Fuzzy Butts. So Andrew Bleiman with Tractive, thank you so much for coming on Fuzzy Butts and Friends this episode. We'll share with you this episode. We'll share with you on Tractive, all the social media. And on that note, everybody, you can listen to this podcast on Spotify or iHeartRadio, or you can watch it on YouTube channel, our YouTube channel, which is fuzzybuttsstudios.com. We'd like to drop it every Tuesday. We've been late last couple of weeks. I've been traveling. My apologies. I'll find where I'm going very soon, and hopefully there'll be a little bit more stability for that. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for this episode. And Ginger, you almost let me get away with it. I forgot to mention our sponsor for this episode.
And I forgot something too. So you do the sponsor. I'll go first.
Go ahead.
So our 2025 cancer Dog Helping Dogs calendar contest is open now. So it's open to all dogs, whether they have cancer or not. You can look it up on puppyupwalk.org/calendar, or just email me at ginger@puppyup.org and I will send you the information. But puppyupwalk.org/calendar.
It's our famous Puppy Up calendar. We've had that going on for 16 years now. I think it's a famous one. Everyone loves it. So please go and put your Fuzzy Butt in the calendar contest. That would be great. All right, everybody. Until next time, we'll see you next week. Puppy up. Talk soon. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.